U.S. AC-130 Gunship decimates Iran-backed Militia Convoy, Iraq border crossing. From 12,000 feet, a T-72 main battle tank looks like a small, glowing white brick on a black screen. It is silent. It is unsuspecting. But inside the pressurized fuselage of an AC-130 gunship orbiting in the dark above, a crew of 13 men is watching that tank's turret rotate toward American troops. The fire control officer speaks 2 words into the intercom. 2 words that turn the desert floor into an inferno. Shot. Out. In early 2018, the war against ISIS was winding down, but a much more dangerous conflict was heating up in the vacuum they left behind. Eastern Syria had become a chessboard of superpowers. To the west of the Euphrates River lay the forces of the Syrian regime, supported by Russian mercenaries and Iranian-backed militias. To the east lay the Syrian Democratic Forces, advised by a small team of U.S. Army Special Operations and Marines. The river was the deconfliction line, a hard border agreed upon by Washington and Moscow to prevent World War III. But on the night of February 7th, that line was erased. A massive armored column, spearheaded by Russian contractors and Iranian-supported fighters, began to move under the cover of darkness. Their target was a small outpost guarding the Conoco gas fields. Their mistake was assuming the Americans would retreat. Instead, they walked into the kill box of the deadliest close air support platform in history, the AC-130U Spooky. Over the Euphrates River Valley, February 7th, 2018, 2200 hours. The air inside the AC-130U Spooky gunship is dry and smells faintly of hydraulic fluid and ozone. The aircraft, call sign Spooky 43, is loitering in a left-hand wheel orbit at an altitude of 15,000 feet. The 4 turboprop engines drone in a synchronized hypnotic rhythm that vibrates through the floorboards. Major Anderson, the aircraft commander, keeps the plane in a 30-degree bank. He is not looking out the window. There's nothing to see but pitch black. He flies entirely by instruments, keeping the pylon turned precise so that the guns sticking out the left side of the fuselage remain fixed on a single point on the ground. In the rear of the aircraft, the Battle Management Center, or BMC, is a wall of screens. The sensor operator, a technical sergeant, manipulates a hand controller, zooming the infrared camera in on a cluster of vehicles massing near the village of Marat. Pilot, sensor, I have multiple heavy armor moving east, crossing the coordination line. On the screen, the heat signatures are distinct. The engines of the tanks glow hot white. The exhaust plumes trail behind them like ghosts. This is not a ragtag patrol. It is a battalion-sized element, roughly 500 fighters, accompanied by T-72 tanks and armored personnel carriers. 5 miles away, at the Conoco Mission Support Site, 30 U.S. desperate operators, Green Berets from Delta Force and Rangers, watch the same feed. They are dug into defensive berms, outnumbered nearly 20 to 1. They can hear the squeal of the tank tracks echoing across the valley floor. The rules of engagement are strict. The U.S. cannot fire first. They must wait for a hostile act. The crew of Spooky 43 watches the column advance, weapon systems armed, waiting for the inevitable. At 22:30, the radio silence breaks. The ground force commander's voice cuts through the net, calm but urgent. Taking fire, tank rounds impacting the perimeter. On the sensor screen, the AC-130 crew sees the muzzle flashes. The T-72s have stopped moving and are lobbing 125mm high explosive shells into the American outpost. Mortar teams dismount from the trucks and begin setting up base plates. The coordination is professional. This is a synchronized assault designed to overrun the Americans within the hour. Major Anderson keys the mic to the Joint Terminal Attack Controller, or JTAC, on the ground. Spooky 43 is established in the wheel. We have visual on the arbor. The JTAC's response is immediate. Spooky, you are cleared hot. Danger close. I repeat, cleared hot. Danger close means the enemy is within 600 meters of friendly troops. At this altitude, a millisecond of error in the firing solution means putting a 105mm artillery shell into the American trench.
Inside the gunship, the dynamic shifts from observation to execution. The Fire Control Officer, or FCO, takes over the targeting. He inputs the wind data, air density, and the aircraft's drift into the ballistic computer. Gun crew, prepare the 105, the FCO orders. In the rear of the plane, the aerial gunners physically load the massive M102 howitzer. It is the largest airborne weapon in existence, a field artillery cannon mounted inside an airplane. The loader shoves the brass casing into the breech and slams it shut. Gun up. The FCO aligns the crosshairs on the lead T-72 tank. The computer calculates the lead angle. Shot, the FCO says. Shot, the gunner repeats. Boom. The entire airframe shudders. The recoil of the 105 pushes the nose of the aircraft slightly to the right, a force of several tons. The pilot corrects instantly with the rudder to maintain the orbit. Down below, the shell travels for 12 seconds. On the thermal screen, the result is binary. One moment, the tank is a vehicle. The next, it is a blooming flower of white-hot energy. The turret is tossed into the air like a toy. Secondary explosions ripple out as the tank's ammunition cooks off. Good effect on target, the sensor operator reports, adjusting for the next vehicle. The militia column halts. They are confused. They can't hear the plane over the noise of their own engines and the explosions. They try to maneuver, dispersing off the road into the open desert. This plays exactly into the AC-130's strength. Going to the 40, the FCO announces. The 40mm Bofors cannon begins its rhythmic pounding. Thump, 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 thump. The rounds are smaller, but the rate of fire is relentless. The exploding shells walk a line of destruction through the dismounted infantry trying to set up mortars. The precision is terrifying. The operators can see individual fighters running, stopping, and then disappearing in small puffs of gray smoke. The convoy is trapped in a fatal geometry. They cannot move forward because of the burning tanks blocking the road. They cannot retreat because the AC-130 is effectively mining the rear of the column with airburst rounds. By 2300 hours, the battlefield is a graveyard of burning armor.
But the enemy force is disciplined. They bring up anti-aircraft guns, ZU-23-2s mounted on technicals. Green tracers unzip the sky, searching for the aircraft. Major Anderson sees the tracers arcing past the cockpit window. They are inaccurate, fired blindly into the dark, but they are getting closer. Pilot, braking right, Anderson says, banking the aircraft hard to throw off the aim of the gunners. FCO, prioritize the AAA. The gunship levels out. The sensor operator finds the source of the tracers, a truck parked behind a berm. Gun ready, the loader screams over the intercom. Shot, the 105mm roars again. The shell impacts directly on the truck. The anti-aircraft fire ceases instantly. The crew works with mechanical efficiency. There is no cheering, no yelling, just the call and response of targeting data. Loader, verify round type, HE. Verified HE. Target is APC 300 meters west of the burning tank. Tally. Engage. It is a factory line of destruction. The gunners are sweating in their flight suits, heaving 40-pound shells into the breach, clearing the smoking brass casings that clutter the floor. The smell of cordite is thick in the cabin, stinging their eyes. On the ground, the U.S. Special Forces team watches the devastation. They have ceased firing their own weapons. There is no need. The sky is falling on their attackers. The sheer volume of fire from Spooky 43 creates a wall of steel that physically separates the enemy from the outpost. The battle is reaching its peak intensity, and the AC-130 is about to be joined by even more air power. If you want to see more deep dives into modern air combat and the history of special operations, make sure you subscribe and like this video right now. Your support helps us bring these declassified stories to light. As midnight approaches, the AC-130 is no longer alone. The stack above the Euphrates fills with American air power. F-15E Strike Eagles arrive, dropping 500-pound G-dams on the rear of the enemy formation. AH-64 Apache helicopters swoop in low, their 30mm chain guns mopping up stragglers hiding in the wadis. But the AC-130 remains the primary surgeon. The F-15s are sledgehammers. The Spooky is the scalpel. The sensor operator spots a group of fighters attempting to flank the American position using a drainage ditch.
They are too close for the jets to bomb without hurting the friendlies. Spooky, we have leakers in the ditch to the north, the JTAC radios. Copy, engaging with the 30. The AC-130W, which has relieved the U model, utilizes its 30mm Bushmaster cannon. The rounds impact the ditch with surgical precision. The FLIR screen shows the heat signatures extinguishing one by one. For the militia on the ground, the psychological impact is shattering. They are fighting an enemy they cannot see, cannot hear until the rounds impact, and cannot hide from. The Russian mercenaries, veterans of Chechnya and Ukraine, realize this is not a skirmish, it is a massacre. The communications intercepts picked up by U.S. intelligence paint a picture of panic. "The air is on fire," one Russian commander screams over the radio. "We have no cover, everyone is dying." By 0200 hours, the firing stops. The remnants of the pro-regime force, those who could still walk, have retreated west across the Euphrates. The desert floor is littered with the burning hulks of T-72 tanks, BRDM armored vehicles, and cargo trucks. The AC-130 crew begins the long flight back to base. The floor of the aircraft is covered in hundreds of spent shell casings. The bar barrels are scorched gray from the heat. The BDA, or Battle Damage Assessment, comes in the next morning. Estimated enemy casualties between 200 and 300 killed. Dozens of vehicles destroyed. U.S. casualties, 0. One Syrian Democratic Forces fighter was wounded. The border crossing attempt had been stopped cold. The decisiveness of the air power, specifically the sustained precision fire of the AC-130, sent a message to Moscow and Tehran that would hold for years. The Euphrates line was not to be crossed. The engagement at the Conoco Fields remains one of the most lopsided victories in the history of modern warfare. It demonstrated that even without substantial ground forces, the U.S. military could project devastating power through the air. For the crew of the AC-130, it was a validation of their airframe's terrifying legacy. From Vietnam to Fallujah, and finally to the banks of the Euphrates, the gunship has always been the angel on the shoulder of the infantrymen. On that February night, when 30 Americans faced down an armored brigade, the Angel brought a 105mm cannon. If you enjoyed this detailed breakdown of the AC-130 in action, please subscribe, like, and comment below with which airframe you want us to cover next. Countless thanks for subscribing, liking, and commenting on our video. God bless every one of us.